The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for January 14th. Your reader for this hour is Claudia. Anti-ICE observer groups on watch. Neighbors, activists vow to stay on agents' heels. At 5 a.m. most days, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Watch Groups fires up its signal chat for another day of tracking arrests and raids in South Minneapolis. A homemade checkpoint made of blue recycling bins is already in place near Powderhorn Park. Residents check license plates and flag vehicles they don't recognize or think might carry ICE agents. Those vehicles are the ones that usually blow right past the volunteers, waving at them to slow down, said Andrew Falstrom, age 44, one of the organizers. At school drop-offs, parents and neighbors arm themselves with whistles, ready to blow if they see immigration authorities. Later, they'll drop groceries off for neighbors who are afraid to leave their homes and take others to doctor's appointments. This is the neighborhood where Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old mother of three, was shot and killed by an ICE agent on January 7th. It has been the target of some of the heaviest immigration enforcement actions in the past 6 weeks, and like many of Minneapolis' communities, is home to a coalition of people who decided they needed to stand up for their neighbors when ICE arrived. Good, like others in her community, stopped at the scene of an immigration and customs enforcement action near her Minneapolis home. Video suggests she was pulling away from the scene as she was shot, though Vice President J.D. Vance and Department of Homeland Security officials accused her of using her vehicle as a weapon, leading the agent to fire in self-defense. Vance reposted a video taken by the agent to further the administration's position. Her death sparked protests and vigils in large and small cities across the country that drew tens of thousands of Americans and reignited arguments over tactics used by community groups to monitor ICE's enforcement actions. In recent days, Trump administration officials have called Good and others who track ICE and warn neighbors domestic terrorists. They call themselves neighbors and they aren't backing down, Falstrom said. I don't see anyone deterred. What I see is most people clear-eyed, Falstrom told USA Today. The murder of Renee Good made it clear to everyone in the city just how dangerous and unhinged this group of armed agents actually is. He lives 6 blocks from where Good was killed. He was manning the checkpoint when he heard the sirens and the signal chat light up. For weeks now, people have walked up and down Lake Street before work and on lunch breaks, educating neighbors at grocery stores and bus stops about what their rights are if ICE stops them. Falstrom said, the morning after Good's death, he watched 4 arrests and spotted 12 ICE vehicles in 2 hours on Lake Street alone, he added. When suspected ICE vehicles arrive, a cacophony of car horns and whistle shrieks follows them wherever they go, and a mad dash text chain sends word of their location. A crowd quickly gathers, filming and at times jeering at the agents. When ICE makes an arrest, neighbors call out asking for the arrested person's name and a number the detainee should call. They comb through the cars left behind for identifying information that helps them contact the family of the person taken. An alert and support system. Since the first year of Trump's first term, immigration advocates have braced for a time when communities would need an alert and support system. They have embraced nonviolent cop watch tactics popularized during the civil rights movement that include monitoring and recording police activity, generating multiple accounts of events to supplement the official ones, said Jill Garvey, co-director of States at the Core, which holds virtual ICE watch and community defense training programs. A year ago, before enforcement tactics ramped up, local organizers asked for some kind of training on what to do when the moment came and ICE Watch began, she said. The States at the Core training focuses on monitoring ICE activity and helping the arrested person by getting their name and contact information. The training also provides information about the rights an observer has and what can get them into trouble, such as interfering with an arrest and touching officers, and how to de-escalate a confrontation. It is legal to monitor or film federal agents in the course of their duty. Garvey said more than 10,000 Americans spanning big cities to rural communities have taken the ICE Watch training since Trump was inaugurated last year, but how they implement it looks different in each community. And communities have learned from one another. When ICE arrived in force last year in other Democrat-controlled cities like Los Angeles and Chicago, whistles quickly became the soundtrack of ICE arrest videos. Then honking while following agents' vehicles became popular. More than 1,000 people in Minneapolis signed up for community defense and ICE Watch training the day after Good was shot, according to states at the core. Administration stands behind ICE. The Trump administration has framed groups that monitor and track ICE as improperly keeping the agency from completing immigration removals. Good's spouse was part of the Powder-Horn-Phillips neighborhood chat, Falstrom disclosed, adding that he didn't know how involved the two were. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, in several interviews on January 11th, accused Good of domestic terrorism. On January 12th, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters that Good was a lunatic who was a part of an organized group to interject into and impede law enforcement operations. Days earlier, Leavitt said President Donald Trump stands behind ICE, and the deadly incident occurred as a result of a larger, sinister left-wing movement that has spread across our country where our brave men and women of federal law enforcement are under organized attack. Texas Republican Representative Roger Williams told the conservative station Newsmax that clashes would continue as long as protesters keep challenging immigration officials. We need to see some improvement in the fact that people need to quit demonstrating, quit yelling at law enforcement, challenging law enforcement, and begin to get civil, he said. And until we do that, I guess we're going to have it this way. And the people that are staying in their homes are doing the right thing and need to be protected. But University of Minnesota political science professor Larry Jacobs said the heavy-handed tactics being used, including plans to send hundreds more ICE agents into Minneapolis, are eroding the support the president had from people who wanted increased immigration enforcement and tighter borders. It kind of seems to confirm where the protesters are saying, to the point where you have Middle America, Minnesota saying, "Wait, this is not right," he said. "My neighbors coming together." Falstrom said there are as many neighbors delivering meals, helping with shopping, and getting kids to school as there are recording ICE. He works with Defend the 612, which helps connect people in the Minneapolis area code with the hundreds of small neighborhood groups involved in rapid response, school protection patrols, and community aid planning. "I see my neighbors coming together in ways that they have never done before," Falstrom said. "I can't tell you how many people have responded to these raids after the moment and took on work they never would have imagined themselves doing, like figuring out where kids should go, going through someone's car after they've been abducted, and trying to find the next point of contact and closest relatives. What involvement looks like differs by person," he said. "Not everyone is comfortable filming ICE agents or pleading with people being arrested to provide contact information for their families." Flannery Clark, age 42, a parent in Powder-Horn, said there are parents and community members outside pretty much every school in the Twin Cities at drop-off and pick-up to watch for ICE and contact the administration inside. They even stand guard at schools their children don't attend. Clark, who has an elementary schooler, said she was pepper sprayed at Roosevelt High School, where ICE arrived hours after Good's death. Parents and community members coordinate rides to school, dropping off groceries, and raising rent money for people too afraid to go to work, she said. "It's amazing that thousands of ordinary people are doing this organizing. There's not some magic wand outside group doing it. It's just Minnesotans saying, 'These are our neighbors. We're going to take care of them,'" she said. Good's death hasn't changed her willingness to be involved. "We all are extremely aware of the risks, but this is one of those moments where I really believe you have to do what's right and go into that knowing what the risk is." On the streets, Venus DeMars and her wife Lynette Renee Grandel are ICE observers who live on the same Minneapolis block where Good died. They recorded the aftermath. The couple frequently walk around their surrounding areas with their phones and 3D printed pink whistles. Their neighborhood's group chat on Signal, which has buzzed constantly since ICE agents arrived 6 weeks ago, is busier than ever. The couple said they are more anxious than scared, respectfully acknowledging that our immigrant neighbors are terrified, DeMars said. "We might feel a bit more protected because we're white," Renee Grandel said. "That's not even guaranteed," DeMars countered, shaking her head no, especially after they killed her. Alaskan history carved in totem pole capital. Ketchikan works to preserve and revive indigenous tradition. An arched sign stretching between two city blocks welcomes travelers to Alaska's first city and the salmon capital of the world. But Ketchikan, the first port on many Alaskan cruises, has another name, a nickname, the totem pole capital of the world. Totem poles are unique to the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest. The ones around Ketchikan are particularly old and numerous. The history and the clans that own the totem poles, like their animal clan crests, those are still living, said Irene Dundas, Cultural Resources Manager for the Ketchikan Indian Community. According to its website, its tribal citizens descend from southeast Alaska's three main native peoples, Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian, as well as other Alaska Native tribal nations. We're not black and white photos. We still practice our culture every day and we live it. Travelers should know that there are spectacular and diverse indigenous experiences and stories across every region of the United States, each unlike the other and each transcending generations. To get to them, said Sherry L. Rupert, who is Payette and Washoe and CEO of the American Indigenous Tourism Association. Hear what else visitors should know about Ketchikan. Why it matters. Totem poles are often used to show like family history, clan relationships, crest animals, stories, events, or to memorialize a specific person or event, like a battle or a visit by a dignitary, said Hazel Brewy, a visitor information assistant at the Southeast Alaska Discovery Center, an intra-agency visitor center for public lands in the state. There are more than 80 totem poles around Ketchikan, many of which are visible to the public, according to Erica Jane Christian, Programs Coordinator for Ketchikan Museums, which include the Totem Heritage Center, where the oldest ones are found. Most of those are estimated to be 175 to 200 years old. Normally, she said, they're only really meant to last a generation, 70 or 80 years from the time that this giant western red cedar is felled and then carved and then raised in ceremony until it naturally deteriorates. However, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, residents of native villages on neighboring islands began moving to Ketchikan for various reasons, including work opportunities. When surveyors went back decades later, they discovered many totem poles had been vandalized or stolen. When it comes to the totem poles, our village was totally wiped out by an expedition that came up, said Teresa DeWitt, who is Tlingit and serves as program assistant for Ketchikan Museums. To protect the totem poles that remained, elders from Tlingit villages on Tongass Island and Village Island and a Haida village on Prince of Wales Island allowed theirs to be moved. It was a very big thing, DeWitt said. It's not something we normally do. The Totem Heritage Center was built to house those totem poles, which still belong to the village's descendants, and preserve and perpetuate the traditions behind them with continuing guidance from a Native Advisory Board. Outside the center and elsewhere around Ketchikan, visitors can find newer totem poles, including recreations carved as part of a Civilian Conservation Corps project that began in the 1930s, and modern-day totem poles by master carvers. There has been a real revival effort, and so people are learning to carve and learning to do Northwest Coast design, Dundas said. Totem poles are just a little sliver of the overall beautiful, beautiful culture. What to see? Visitors can see totem poles throughout Ketchikan, but there are three main clusters. Totem Heritage Center, a $9 museum pass covers admission to the Totem Heritage Center and its sister museum, Tongass Historical Museum. You're able to really learn about where it is that you're visiting, where you are in place and time, said Christian. Single museum admission costs $6 for adults under age 65 and $5 for those who are older. Admission is free for children age 17 and under, active duty military service members, and residents. Both museums are in downtown Ketchikan and reachable by foot from the cruise port or the borough's free shuttle bus during the summer. Saxum Totem Park. Visitors can see more poles, a community clan house, and a woodworking totem pole workshop in the organized village of Saxman, less than 3 miles from downtown Ketchikan. Totem Park tours run throughout the cruise season from late April to early October. They can be booked directly through Cape Fox Tours, part of the village's Alaska Native Corps, or as excursions through cruise lines. Self-guided tours cost $8, while Cape Fox's guided tours start at $129 and may include additional experiences like traditional dance performances. Christy Shields, who is Tinglet, recalls being told as a kid that we were going to dance on the dock for big canoes and it ended up being cruise ships. Now she helps pass the tradition on to younger generations as Tours dance manager for Cape Fox Tours. They are dancing, they know their songs, they know who they are, they know where they come from. Saxman can be reached by Ketchikan's free shuttle in the summer or $2 city bus. There is also a foot and bike path, but walking from downtown takes about an hour. Totem Bight State Historical Park. More than a dozen Tinglet and Haida totem poles and a community clan house stand in this 11-acre state park, according to its website. Like many of the totem poles in Saxman, Christian said these were carved as part of a Civilian Conservation Corps totem pole restoration program. Park admission costs $5 per person from May through September and is free from October through April. The park is roughly 10 miles north of downtown Ketchikan and can be reached by a $2 city bus. Not so hidden gems. Salmon Walk. This scenic 1.5-mile loop meanders through the heart of the city along Ketchikan Creek, where salmon famously swim in the summer. There are various interpretive signs and points of interest along the way, including famous Creek Street and both Ketchikan museums. Visitors who don't want to complete the loop can catch the free downtown shuttle from the Totem Heritage Center, which marks the path's halfway point. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 15 minutes after the hour. Continuing with our article in Ketchikan, Alaska. Southeast Alaska Discovery Center. This is a great starting point for learning about the region through ranger-led activities, educational films, and elaborate exhibits. 3 masterful carved totem poles in the atrium represent the region's main native peoples. Visitors can learn more through the Native Traditions exhibit developed with Tinglet, Haida, and Tsimshian elders so they could tell their own story, Brewy said. The Southeast Alaska Discovery Center is located a few blocks from the cruise port. Admission is free from October through April. From May through September, admission costs $5 for visitors over the age of 15 and is free for anyone younger. Visitors with America the Beautiful interagency passes also get free entry. Tongass National Forest. Ketchikan is nestled within America's largest national forest and the world's largest intact temperate rainforest, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Visitors eager to explore the great outdoors will find over 24 hiking trails around Ketchikan, many of which can be reached on public transit, according to Brewy. She recommends first stopping by the Southeast Alaska Discovery Center for the latest information on conditions and bears. Best time to visit. Summer is the busiest time of the year with the mildest weather and the widest array of visitor experiences. Travelers hoping to avoid crowds may opt to visit early or late in the cruise season. However, Dundas notes, later in the season, like in October, you're really pushing it with weather, and you have to be prepared for the Ketchikan weather. Ketchikan got over 12 feet of rain in 2025, according to the National Weather Service, and October is among its soggiest months. She recommends visiting in July and early August when various festivals are held and packing a raincoat like locals, if you go. Getting there, most visitors arrive by cruise, including more than 1.5 million people in 2025, according to the Ketchikan Visitors Bureau. Travelers can also fly into Ketchikan International Airport, a short ferry ride away from Gravina Island. Alaska Airlines provides daily service between Ketchikan and Seattle, as well as several other Alaska cities. Where to stay, Ketchikan offers a variety of hotels. Campgrounds and vacation rentals are also available nearby. The reporter on this story received access from Celebrity Cruises. USA Today maintains editorial control. Trump tells protesters in Iran help is on its way. A day after the Trump administration said striking Iran from the air was on the table, President Donald Trump encouraged Iranian protesters to continue the fight and promised that help is on the way. Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions, save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price, Trump posted on Truth Social. I have canceled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. Help is on its way. Mega. Demonstrations in Tehran began in late December when the value of the Iranian rial plunged against the U.S. dollar, deepening an already devastating economic crisis amid soaring inflation. The violence has resulted in hundreds of deaths and drawn the condemnation of human rights organizations. An Iranian official said January 12th that about 2,000 people have been killed in the protests, according to Reuters. It is the first time authorities have acknowledged the high death toll from an intense crackdown amid 2 weeks of nationwide unrest, the news agency reported. Attacking Iran is on the table as Trump weighs military options after the Iranian regime's deadly crackdown on the country's largest protest in years, the White House said. One thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said January 12th, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table for the commander-in-chief. Russia has condemned what it described as subversive external interference in Iran's internal politics and said U.S. threats of military strikes against the country were categorically unacceptable. Those who plan to use externally inspired unrest as a pretext for repeating the aggression against Iran committed in June 2025 must be aware of the disastrous consequences of such actions for the situation in the Middle East and global international security, the Russian Foreign Ministry said in a statement. Trump also said countries doing business with Iran will face a 25% tariff on their trade with the United States. Iran, a major oil exporter, is already under heavy U.S. sanctions. It exports much of its oil to China, Turkey, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates, and India are among its top trading partners. Prosecutor fired by administration after hesitancy on the Comey case. A Justice Department prosecutor was fired after saying he would struggle to take on a criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey alongside his other responsibilities, according to multiple media reports. Robert K. McBride was working in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia when he was let go after expressing his hesitancy to personally push forward with the prosecution, according to reports by the New York Times and by MS Now, which reported the news first. Each outlet cited anonymous sources familiar with the matter. In additional potential context for the firing, the news outlets each cited an anonymous source as saying McBride also had private meetings with federal judges in the district. Officials have not publicly accused McBride of any professional wrongdoing. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia declined to comment. Comey's case was dismissed in November after a federal judge ruled that Lindsay Halligan, the prosecutor who secured charges against the former FBI director, was serving unlawfully. The Justice Department has appealed that decision. Halligan fought the charges, which alleged that Comey lied to Congress and obstructed a congressional proceeding after Trump on social media last year called for Comey to be prosecuted. Tensions between Trump and Comey go back years. Trump in 2017 fired Comey from heading the FBI, which was investigating possible contacts between the 2016 Trump campaign and the Russian government. In the following years, Comey became a prominent critic of the president. Trump screwed if tariffs overturned. He sees disaster if justices rule against him. President Donald Trump warned of a financial disaster for the United States if the Supreme Court rules that sweeping global tariffs on imports are illegal. The nation's High Court is preparing to issue an opinion as early as January 14th. If the Supreme Court rules against the United States of America on this national security bonanza, we're screwed, Trump posted January 12th on Truth Social, claiming the United States would be on the hook to pay back many hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue collected from the tariffs and trillions more in private investments. As a legal basis for most of his tariffs, Trump declared a national emergency of the United States trade deficit under the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act. But a majority of Supreme Court justices expressed skepticism of Trump's use of emergency powers during oral arguments in November. The federal government collected about $200 billion more in tariffs revenue in 2025 as a result of the president's tariffs on imports from across the world. Tariffs are paid by companies when they import goods from other countries, but Trump said the amount of payback, if the Supreme Court rules against him, extends to the money that companies in other nations are spending to build factories and equipment in the United States to avoid paying the higher tariffs. When these investments are added, we are talking about trillions of dollars. It would be a complete mess and almost impossible for our country to pay, Trump wrote. Anybody who says that it can be quickly and easily done would be making a false, inaccurate, or totally misunderstood answer to this very large and complex question. It may not be possible, but if it were, it would be dollars that would be so large that it would take many years to figure out what number we are talking about and even who, when, and where to pay. Trump has often exaggerated the level of private investment in the United States spurred by his tariffs, and some of the companies that have pledged American-based investments have yet to follow through. Trump did not say how he arrived at the trillions figure. A ruling against Trump's use of emergency powers to impose tariffs would deliver a massive blow to the centerpiece of Trump's domestic agenda and his favorite tool in trade negotiations with other countries. The ruling also could have major implications on the global economy and Trump's assertions of broad executive authority. In the weeks since justices discussed the tariffs during oral arguments, Trump has routinely pressured the court publicly to rule on his side. The Supreme Court is expected to issue its next rulings on January 14th, but it was unclear whether it would include a ruling in the tariff case, which arrived at the Supreme Court on appeal from the Trump administration. The Supreme Court does not announce in advance which cases will be decided. A federal appeals court ruled in August that most of Trump's tariffs were unlawful after a legal challenge from a group of businesses opposed to the tariffs. Trump has said he's preparing a Game 2 plan to carry out his tariff agenda if the court rules his tariffs are illegal, but he has called other potential avenues slow in comparison with his use of emergency powers. Senator Kelly sues Hegseth over military censure. Arizona Democrat says free speech is at stake. Senator Mark Kelly, a retired Navy captain and astronaut, has filed a lawsuit against War Secretary Pete Hegseth over threats to reduce his military pension. His unconstitutional crusade against me sends a chilling message to every retired member of the military. If you speak out and say something that the President or Secretary of Defense doesn't like, you will be censured, threatened with demotion, or even prosecuted, Kelly, Democrat of Arizona, said on social media. The lawsuit filed January 12th is the latest clash in one of the highest profile between Democratic lawmakers and the Trump administration over military policies. Disputes have flared over the deployment of National Guard troops in cities to help immigration enforcement officers, the military's removal of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, and President Donald Trump's threats to take control of Greenland. Hegseth Kelly undermined the chain of command. The Pentagon was aware of the lawsuit but declined to comment. A half-dozen lawmakers released a video in November stating that members of the military have a legal obligation to disregard unlawful orders. Trump and Hegseth have accused Kelly of sedition and treason. Hegseth issued a censure letter January 5th saying Kelly's statements undermined the chain of command and counseled disobedience. The department is also considering reducing Kelly's rank in retirement, and Hegseth's letter threatened criminal prosecution if Kelly continued to make similar statements. Kelly lawsuit argues Pentagon punishment will chill free speech. Kelly's lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court in Washington argued that the punishments violated his First Amendment right to free speech. He also argued the executive branch was trying to prevent debate among lawmakers. If permitted to stand, the Secretary's censure and the grade determination proceedings that he has directed will inflict immediate and irreparable harm, the lawsuit said. The censure, the grade reduction process, and its inevitable outcome impose official punishment for protected speech, chill legislative oversight, and threaten reductions in rank and pay. Kelly in video. You can refuse illegal orders. The video from 6 Democratic lawmakers, Don't Give Up the Ship, released November 18th, came amid the investigation of U.S. strikes on Venezuelan boats suspected of carrying drugs. The lawmakers had served in the military or intelligence community. Video of a sinking September 2nd appeared to show survivors of a strike when hit by a second strike. Even GOP lawmakers, including Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky and Rep. Mike Turner of Ohio, warned that a second strike could be a violation of the law of war. The Department of Defense Law of War Manual provides that members of the armed forces must refuse to comply with clearly illegal orders to commit law of war violations. Our laws are clear, Kelly said in the video. You can refuse illegal orders. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The The time is 30 minutes after the hour. Nation prepares for a year-long celebration of its 250th birthday. Spectacle and reflection will tell the country's story. This year, Arizona will ferry a replica of the Liberty Bell through its 15 counties. New Jersey will host a slate of history-themed 5K races. Kentucky will plant a tulip poplar tree in each of its 120 counties, and Colorado will dazzle nearly 150 of its communities with drone shows. Across the country, Americans will walk into mobile Airstream studios to tell their stories. Children will write about what America means to them for a chance to win a historical trip, and charity organizations will try to log the most volunteer service hours in history. These are but a sampling of the dizzy array of initiatives planned to mark the semi-quincentennial, the 250th year anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Years of work by national organizations, states, local governments, and nonprofits will culminate in what is expected to be a months-long symphony of reflection and celebration across the country. America 250, the official commission designated by Congress to organize the commemoration, deliberately planned a wide range of programs from grand parades and fireworks to reflective essay contests, town halls, and newly commissioned works of art. Every state had a different path to becoming part of the United States of America. If you look at our country, where we were in 1776, Alaska was part of Russia, Hawaii was its own kingdom, California was Spain. Chair Rosie Rios told USA Today, "Our goal is really to empower the states to also tell their stories. We want to make this as grassroots and community-driven as possible," Rios said, adding that optionality is among the key ways the group plans to engage all of the nearly 350 million people living in the country. A divided America. America 250 has organized a lineup of national programming to guide the year-long red, white, and blue extravaganza. For instance, the group is running a nationwide contest called America's Field Trip, asking young people in grades 3 through 12 to produce an essay of artwork that describes what America means to them. 125 winners will receive a 3-day trip to a historical or cultural site around the country, such as the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. The organization is also encouraging nonprofits, schools, faith groups, and businesses to rack up a record-setting amount of volunteer hours to rekindle the culture of community service. Americans are urged to take a year of service pledge and log their volunteer hours. Rios said the initiatives were created to educate, engage, and unite, the latter of which is no easy task at a time when Americans are deeply divided, particularly over how to tell the country's story. Last year, President Donald Trump signed an executive order focused on how history is presented, urging institutions to tell an uplifting story of American history. He announced a review of the Smithsonian Institution, arguing that the museums were too woke and focused too much on how bad slavery was. The moves were criticized by academics and historians who argued they were an attempt to whitewash the nation's past. In December, he launched a nonprofit called Freedom 250 to organize a slew of initiatives separate from those outlined by the bipartisan America 250. He plans to host an Ultimate Fighting Championship match on the White House lawn and an athletic competition among high school students that has been compared to the fictional Hunger Games and ridiculed by Democrats. Despite the counter-programming, Rios told USA Today that partisanship that defines American politics has not bled into the commemoration planning. Trump, she said, deserves to plan the celebration that he wants to plan. "We think this will only contribute to the need for folks to really reflect, engage as they see fit." Rios said whether they want it to be a celebration, whether they want it to be a commemoration, we have all those abilities in place. History repeats itself 50 years on. This year's celebrations are bound to be compared to the bicentennial of 1976, an anniversary remembered for its tall ships and Uncle Sam merchandise. The lead up to and orchestration of the 250th is reminiscent of that last major milestone observance 50 years ago. While the bicentennial is often criticized for its more commercial elements, historian and American University professor M.J. Ramza Palauska said it was a moment of enormous resource building across the country. If you do an image search for bicentennial, what you'll see is like a parade at Disneyland where all the Disney characters are dressed up in tri-corner hats and they're on top of a gigantic birthday cake. Ramiza Pawlowski said. In reality, she suggested, the majority of the programming around the 1976 anniversary happened at the local level and was viewed less as patriotic and more reflective. The Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum opened for the bicentennial in 1976, and the annual Smithsonian Folklife Festival began on the National Mall in Washington that year. Across the country, history museums and historical societies were established as part of the commemoration. John Dichtel, president of the American Association for State and Local History, argued same is likely to be true for the 250th. Thousands of organizations from coast to coast have been building and organizing for the anniversary, some for more than a decade. Most Americans will be touched by the 250th through these events in their local communities more so than the endeavors of national organizations, Dichtel suggested. What they're really going to remember years later is how they and their families connected locally with history, Dichtel said. It, by definition, makes it an inclusive, widely shared story of what this country is. Looking back at her own memories of the bicentennial, Rios, who was in elementary school at the time, said more than the tall ships and Freedom Train, she remembered the commemoration as a feeling. It's how she hopes other Americans will remember the semi-quincentennial. I believe strongly that this is as much about the future as it is the past, she told USA Today. That ongoing journey to become more perfect is exactly what we are commemorating and hopefully planting the seed for an even longer journey and a longer conversation about who we want to be as a country. Meet the two women in line to take reins in Venezuela. Political rivals compete for Trump's approval. One is a smart, savvy political operator. She sometimes rubs people the wrong way, but skillfully navigates her way through Venezuela's power hierarchy. She's now installed as the country's interim leader after the United States forcibly removed President Nicolas Maduro. The other is a former member of the country's National Assembly and as an activist who led the opposition to Maduro and his predecessor, Hugo Chavez. She was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for what the committee that bestows the honor described as her tireless fight for peace. She was expected by many in Venezuela to take the reins of the country after Maduro's downfall. Delcy Rodriguez and Maria Corina Machado are the most prominent political figures in Venezuela. Political rivals, Rodriguez and Machado are key players inside the Latin American nation's descent. Latin America's nation's power vacuum. Both deeply understand that their future and that of their country is tied to winning the favor of one man, Donald J. Trump. Machado, who has been living in hiding outside Venezuela, is expected to bring her charm offensive to Washington later this week. She is scheduled to meet with Trump at the White House on Thursday, January 15th. It will be the first time they've spoken since October 10th, the day she was announced as the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, which Trump had wanted and had lobbied to get. No meeting between Trump and Rodriguez has been scheduled, but the administration says it has been in regular touch with her in the months leading up to Maduro's removal. Trump has said that he'd like to go to Venezuela when things settle down and that he'd likely to meet with Rodriguez. The sit-down between Machado and Trump comes 2 weeks after members of a U.S. Army elite force operating under the cover of darkness swooped into Maduro's compound in Caracas, captured him and his wife, Celia Flores, and whisked both to New York to face drug trafficking charges. For Machado, the White House visit is make or break. Inside Venezuela, it has been long assumed that should Maduro fall, the country's next president would be Machado or Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia, whom she had picked to run for president after the government barred her from running. Gonzalez won the 2024 election, but Maduro refused to accept the results and declared himself the winner. A few hours after Maduro's capture on January 3rd, Trump, speaking at a news conference at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, dispelled any notion that Machado would become Venezuela's next president. I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader, he told reporters. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect. A classified CIA analysis had concluded that Rodriguez, Venezuela's vice president, would be best positioned to lead a temporary government in Caracas if Maduro should be removed. Multiple news outlets reported. Trump said a U.S. team, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, would run Venezuela until a safe and proper transition could take place. Rodriguez was formally sworn in as interim president January 5th. Missed and met opportunities. For Machado, an outspoken opponent of Maduro's party since it first won power under Chavez in 1998, Trump's remarks were not only a severe blow to her campaign to lead Venezuela, they were also a sign of how she had misread key cues and missed other opportunities in her effort to rally U.S. support. Machado, known by her supporters as Venezuela's Iron Lady, has been working for months to win over Trump, even dedicating her Nobel Peace Prize to him for his decisive support of our cause. Machado suggested in early January that she would give her prize to Trump, but the Norwegian institute that bestows the honor threw cold water on that idea, saying that the award is permanent and final, and that it cannot be transferred to another person. Other opportunities to curry favor with the Trump administration went unheeded. Machado, who speaks English, declined a request early in 2025 to meet with Trump's personal envoy, Richard Grenell. Grenell had been tasked with engaging in diplomatic talks with Maduro's regime to explore possible oil deals with his administration and try to help secure the release of Americans detained in Venezuela. Grenell also reached out to Machado, who agreed to talk to him over the phone instead of meeting with him in person. According to the New York Times, over time the newspaper said their relationship deteriorated. Machado and her team ignored Grenell's request for a list of political prisoners, and Grenell grew frustrated when she expressed no concrete ideas of how to put the democratically elected government into power. Grenell did not respond to a request by USA Today for comment. Rodriguez, on the other hand, had been working behind the scenes for years to win Trump's favor. Rodriguez, who was Venezuela's finance minister when Trump was first elected in 2016, ordered Citgo, a subsidiary of the state oil company, to contribute $500,000 to Trump's inaugural committee, according to Federal Election Commission records. Rodriguez is also fluent in English and reportedly lived in Santa Monica, California during her college years, the daughter of a leftist guerrilla leader who was detained in the kidnapping of an American businessman. She served as the head of Maduro's communications ministry, later as foreign minister, and then vice president. Her portfolio expanded to include control over much of Venezuela's oil economy after Maduro promoted her to vice president in 2018. Tasked with managing U.S. sanctions on the country's most important industry, Rodriguez scrapped price controls, spearheaded an anti-corruption campaign, and put in place other reforms that slowly helped boost oil production and endeared her to much of the country's business community. After Maduro's capture, Rodriguez denounced the U.S. strike as a brutal attack, but she quickly developed a more conciliatory tone, saying she wanted to move toward balanced and respectful relations with Washington and invited the U.S. government to work with her on an agenda of cooperation. For her part, Machado took a swipe at Rodriguez during a television interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity. Delcy Rodriguez, as you know, is one of the main architects of torture, persecution, corruption, narco-trafficking. Machado said she's the main ally and liaison with Russia, China, Iran, certainly not an individual that could be trusted by international investors. And she's really rejected, repudiated by the Venezuelan people. But the Trump administration has been encouraged by what it has seen out of Rodriguez. Asked whether Trump has confidence in Rodriguez, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said January 11th that the events of the past week had shown that Trump made the right assessment of what needed to take place in Venezuela. Rodriguez and her team have been very cooperative, Leavitt said, pointing to the oil deal Trump cut with them and their commitment to release of political prisoners. We've seen a great level of cooperation, and the president expects that to continue, Leavitt told reporters at the White House. In her meeting with Trump, Machado needs to convince Trump that the only way to actually ensure stability is for the opposition to be in a position to take power, said Uriel Epstein, executive director of the Renew Democracy Initiative, a nonprofit organization that runs a program that brings together dissidents from around the world. For example, Exxon's CEO said last week that Venezuela is uninvestable at the moment. Machado needs to explain that will remain the case so long as Rodriguez is in charge of the country, said Epstein, who is close to the Venezuelan opposition. So protecting and supporting the opposition is not only a matter of doing the morally right thing, it is a matter of achieving the ends that Trump himself set out, he said. What's the plan for Venezuela? Trump's work with the interim government is about the administration of the country in the short term, during the transition from Maduro, said Alexander Gray, who was chief of staff at the National Security Council during Trump's first term. They have some real logistical challenges in that nobody from the Venezuelan opposition has had a role in running Venezuela for 25 years. Trying to come in and take over some immediate role, I don't think that's realistic. Gray said Machado should have reasonable expectations for when it makes sense to have the opposition come back into the country and should arrive with a very clear sense of what she's asking the United States to do to help restore democracy. That includes presenting a plan for reforming the country's National Election Commission and its judiciary, which is packed with pro-regime judges. There's just so many blocking and tackling pieces that have to get fixed here before it makes sense to announce this big democratic transition, said Gray, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council, a nonpartisan think tank. And so I think she needs to be very clear with the Americans about what it is she needs to be realistically in a position to have that transition. For the United States, what happens next is less about picking and choosing the opposition and more about working with the current regime to get them to do the types of things that would make a transition possible, Gray said. It's not about Machado or Rodriguez, he said. It really is about having a partner who's willing to be cooperative here on this transition and executing the immediate things we need in the short term. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 15 minutes after the hour. FBI suspect targeted historic synagogue. Alleged arson aimed at Jewish ties in MS. A suspect connected to the alleged arson at a historic synagogue told federal authorities that he lit the fire due to the building's Jewish ties, according to a federal affidavit filed January 12th. The affidavit identifies the suspect in the blaze at Beth Israel Congregation Synagogue as Stephen Spencer Pittman, age 19. A criminal complaint states that he is charged with arson of property used in interstate commerce. A January 12th news release from Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves said that more charges could be filed pending the ultimate outcome of the investigation. In an interview with the law enforcement on the day of the fire, Pittman referred to the synagogue as a synagogue of Satan and said he told his father he finally got them, the affidavit says. The fire occurred about 3 a.m. January 10th at the historic synagogue. Security camera footage released later by the synagogue showed a masked and hooded person, now alleged to be Pittman, using a gas container to pour a liquid on the floor and a couch in the lobby. The Jackson Fire Department responded and was able to contain and extinguish the blaze. No injuries were reported. An administrative office and library were charred in the fire, according to multiple reports, and several Torahs were ruined or damaged. USA Today has reached out to lawyers listed as representing Pittman for the comment on January 12th. Father pleaded for son to stop during alleged arson. Authorities allege in the affidavit that Pittman traveled from his residence in Madison County, about 30 miles north of Jackson, and stopped at Mark's Gas on Highway 51 in Ridgeland to purchase the gas used for the fire. The affidavit states he took his license plate off at the gas station before heading to the synagogue. After arriving, Pittman allegedly texted his father, identified in court records only by his initials, a photo of the rear of the Beth Israel building. There's a furnace in the back. Messages seen on a phone in the affidavit read, BTW, my plate is off, hoodie is on, and they have the best cameras. The affidavit states his father pleaded with his son to return home, but Pittman replied by saying he was due for a home run and I did my research. Once at the synagogue, Pittman used an axe to break a window out of the building, poured the gas inside the building, and used a torch lighter to start the fire. According to the affidavit, father alerts authorities. The affidavit states that later on January 10th, Pittman's father observed burns on his son's ankles, hands, and face. The father then confronted his son about what happened that morning, and Pittman allegedly confessed to the crime. Pittman laughed as he told his father what he did and said he finally got them, the affidavit reads. The father then contacted the FBI and said that his son confessed to setting the building on fire, according to the affidavit. Data on Pittman's cell phone and the burn marks on Pittman's body corroborated that information, the affidavit states. The FBI later recovered a burned cell phone believed to be Pittman's and recovered a hand torch that a member of the congregation found and turned over to the authorities. The statement from Reeves said that Pittman was self-admitted into the University of Mississippi Medical Center with non-life-threatening burn injuries and subsequently taken into custody. Who is Stephen Spencer Pittman? Pittman was a former student and baseball player at St. Joseph Catholic School in Madison and a baseball player at Coahoma Community College. The Catholic Diocese of Jackson confirmed his attendance to the Clarion Ledger, a part of the USA Today network, and stated the actions attributed to Pittman are senseless, reprehensible, and wholly incompatible with the values taught by the Catholic Church and upheld in our Catholic schools. Pittman announced his commitment in 2023 to play baseball at a Coahoma Community College. Coahoma is a public, historically black community college, though many of its baseball players are white. Pittman no longer has a biography page on the college's baseball roster. He is not listed as having recorded any statistics, though his Instagram shows him playing for the school. Fire took place at historic synagogue. Beth Israel is Jackson's oldest synagogue, dating to before the Civil War. The Ku Klux Klan bombed both the temple's office and former Rabbi Perry Nussbaum's home in November of 1967. No one was killed during that incident. Mississippi stands with the members of the Beth Israel congregation, Reeves said in the news release. This heinous act will never be tolerated, and the perpetrator should face the full and solemn weight of their actions. Pam Dankins reports for the Clarion Ledger, and James Powell reports for USA Today. Opinion. Thanks to Trump, what revived rural America is all at risk. Small towns are in for a sobering stretch of economic challenges as elected officials reverse pandemic-era policies that have been reviving them. COVID-19 was a huge, unexpected opportunity for rural America. The pandemic brought jobs and people to places that had been in decline. One reason is that the pandemic brought a sharp shift in household consumption towards goods and away from services. Rural America, the manufacturing heartland, benefited from job growth in 2022 and 2023. That growth slowed by 2024, but legislation like Senator Todd Young's CHIPS and Science Act offered at least a hint that we might be entering a period of more stable factory employment. Unlike most of the world, the U.S. economy boomed after COVID-19. The effects were particularly obvious in labor markets, pushing us down to the longest stretch of sub-4% unemployment since the 1960s. This attracted immigrants, legal and illegal, many of whom came to rural America for economic opportunity. This was a rare advantage for rural places with low quality of life. Economic migrants are driven more by good-paying jobs than luxuries such as walkable neighborhoods or nationally ranked schools. As was the case during the 19th and early 20th centuries, immigrants moved to places native-born Americans were fleeing. Immigration became a once-in-a-century opportunity for rural places facing the deepest economic decline. The pandemic also brought opportunities to rural places with high quality of life and small job markets. That's because COVID-19 accelerated remote work, severing the geographic ties between homes and offices and permitting families to choose rural communities while keeping their jobs. New businesses also grew during the pandemic, bringing in an excess supply of college-educated workers. Rural Americans pay fewer taxes and collect more social benefits. Meanwhile, rural America continued to benefit from tax policies, both federal and state. Rural Americans are older, poorer, and face higher rates of disability. They pay fewer taxes and collect more benefits than their urban or suburban counterparts. Indiana's poorest rural county receives about $16,000 more per year in per capita federal transfer payments than it pays. That same county receives $1,500 more per resident in state taxes than it pays. Along with this, place-based economic policies favored rural counties. For example, child care tax credits, a popular state policy, did more to allow rural families to work than almost any other policy in the past half-century. Taken together, these policies and economic realities offered rural America a brighter future. But today, everything I've just mentioned is at risk or gone entirely. What did President Trump do? The Trump administration has ended remote work for federal workers. Many states, including Indiana, have followed suit for state workers. That directly hurts rural America. Tariffs and the trade war have reversed manufacturing employment and production. They are also eviscerating agricultural exports. Job growth effectively stopped in April. The deepest job losses are just now settling into rural America, with losses clustered in manufacturing, logistics, and agriculture. Immigration has also stopped, and with its prospects of population growth for about two-thirds of rural counties. This loss of new families means employers won't consider these places. They need workers. Schools will shrink, churches will lose congregants, and decline will accelerate. Federal funding will slow under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That's unsurprising and inevitable given our large federal debt. Despite what many believe, though, the geography of those cuts is dominated by rural places. The deepest cuts come to Medicaid and other anti-poverty programs that see their heaviest use in rural places. This will lead to the closure of a number of rural hospitals across the county and country as they rely so heavily on this support. There's a little disagreement on the magnitude of these effects in Washington, D.C. and state houses across the country, but rural Americans voted so overwhelmingly for Republicans that neither party has much incentive to address these problems, and so they will come to pass until the 1 in 5 Americans who live in rural places decide the current policy environment is robbing them of a prosperous future. Michael J. Hicks is the director of Center for Business and Economic Research and a contributing columnist for the Indianapolis Star, where this column originally appeared. Hegseth vows to use military AI without woke constraints. War Secretary Peg Hegseth laid a plan for advancing military artificial intelligence during a speech in Texas, saying he's creating an AI-first war-fighting force that won't be constrained by woke models. Hegseth has been outspoken about ridding the military of woke policies, including diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and transgender troops. Gone are the days of equitable AI and other DEI and social justice infusions that constrain and confuse our employment of this technology, Hegseth said. Effective immediately, responsible AI at the War Department means objectively truthful AI capabilities employed securely and within laws. We will not employ AI models that won't allow you to fight wars, Hegseth added. He said the department would employ AI without ideological constraints, and that will not be woke. Hegseth's comments come amid growing concern about the threats posed by AI. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the UN Security Council in September that AI needs guardrails and called for a ban on lethal autonomous weapons systems operating without human control. Hegseth said the United States won't be limited in its pursuit of new military capabilities. We are done running a peacetime science fair while our potential adversaries are running a wartime arms race, he said. He vowed to move quickly, saying the risks of falling behind are greater than the impacts of imperfect alignment. In pushing AI, Hegseth is reorganizing aspects of the military in a way that he argued will be more conducive to innovation and rapid adoption of new technologies. He criticized consolidation in the defense industry, saying new defense contractors face too many barriers, and he vowed to make it easier for them. Hegseth was introduced at the event by SpaceX founder Elon Musk, who led the Department of Government Efficiency cost-cutting effort in the early months of the President Donald Trump's second term and holds significant defense contracts. How about this, Hegseth said as he offered a Vulcan salute as he stood next to Musk, Star Trek real. The War Secretary said he wants to cut through bureaucracy Elon style in reorienting the Pentagon. Today is about how we supercharge innovation at the War Department for the era ahead, he said. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from USA Today for January 14th on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for this hour has been Claudia, and I thank you for listening.
You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As of this year, our agency has broadcast more than 300,000 hours of radio readings. Volunteer radio readers read newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Reading's broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading broadcasts from studios at 1199 Harlem Road in suburban Buffalo. Please let others know about Radio Reading. It's your service. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call 716-821-5555.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of the USA Today. Your reader for this hour is Nancy. As Super Bowl 59 memory fades, a reset is done. Suggestions to fix the Eagles for 2026 as repeat hope extinguished. The title defense of the reigning Super Bowl champion Eagles died Sunday, January 11th. Much like another Jalen Hurts pass on a blustery and dark South Philly night. Yet even if that outcome didn't necessarily seem like an inevitable conclusion, a mandate for this team to shine a spotlight on its issues was always going to be unavoidable. Anytime you lose, anytime you don't perform the way you want to as coaches and players, yeah, you're frustrated, head coach Nick Sirianni said following his team's 23-19 ouster by the San Francisco 49ers. What I said to the guys is, adversity shapes you to who you are and if you allow it to. There's a lot to be thankful for, but you've got to use this adversity to shape you, and that's for everybody in that locker room. Myself, the coaches, the players. Let the pain shape you to what you want to be, and we will use this like we used it at the end of 22-23, because all that was necessary for 24. We'll see what the future holds. First, a word on the recent past. Whatever you might think of Sirianni, and he can be overtly brash, especially on game days, he's also calculating, plugged into his team, and highly respected and generally loved by his players. The Eagles have made the playoffs in all 5 of his seasons, reaching Super Bowls 57 and 59. Sunday's defeat was Sirianni's first at home in the postseason after a 5-0 start. His team is obviously talented and brilliantly constructed. He's a coach almost any organization would, or certainly should, covet. Yet he's aware a reckoning is at hand, similar to the 2023 campaign's aftermath, when the Eagles lost 6 of their final 7 games following a 10-1 start. However, I've talked to enough players who don't feel like the 2025 team's failure was analogous to the 23 squad's collapse. So what are the next steps? Here are 6 suggestions the Eagles should consider if they want to return to the Super Bowl stage and chase a 3rd Lombardi trophy sooner than later. Number 1, find a veteran offensive coordinator. Not a hot take, but one that's been out of the oven for months. Swirling about embattled player caller Kevin Patullo, a lightning rod for fans and the unsparing ecosystem that is the city of brotherly love. His likely demise was again a popular line of questioning Sunday night, to the point where the team's public relations staff tried to shut it down in the locker room at one point. I think it's tough to single out one individual, especially in a moment like this. We all got to improve, and that's how I look at everything that we go through, said Hurts. It's typical for players to defend their coaches and vice versa, but the numbers speak for themselves. A star-studded attack ranked 24th overall in 2025 and 19th in points scored after being in the top 10 in both categories the previous season, when the Eagles were at their best in the playoffs. The Eagles averaged 36.3 points and 361 yards in 4 postseason games last year. Aside from their 19 points against the Niners, they had 307 yards. Overly, Philly averaged 5.2 yards per play this season, nearly a half yard fewer year over year. Equally concerning was the significantly reduced production of players like Hurts, tailback Saquon Barkley. He ran for the most yards ever in a season, regular and postseason combined, in 2024, and wideout A.J. Brown. Philly endured a similar fall-off in 2023, internally promoted coordinator Brian Johnson failing to meet the bar future Indianapolis coach Shane Steichen set in 2022. Patullo, Phillies passing game coordinator the previous 4 seasons, ran into a comparable challenge after predecessor Kellen Moore took the New Orleans Saints head job after Super Bowl 59. Sirianni has to find the right fit for his roster's talent. Recently fired Miami Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel, for example, probably isn't the appropriate choice given his schemes and philosophy. If the unit is to revert to being more than the sum of its expensive parts. There will be time to evaluate everybody's performance, said Sirianni. Right now, I feel for all our guys in the locker room. All the players, all the coaches, the front office, everybody that works so hard. The fans that come out and support us. Mr. Owner Jeffrey Lurie, I feel for all of us, all of them, and there will be time to evaluate everything coming up. Number 2, maximize Jalen Hurts' talents. It's a corollary to step 1, but whoever's designing the offense in 2026 must resource Hurts more effectively. He typically plays his best in big games, has off-the-charts intangibles, and doesn't seem to feel pressure, at least the figurative variety. But Sunday night was a reminder that Hurts, who led one fourth-quarter comeback all season, is generally much more effective playing from ahead, and he's quite capable of building a lead. Utilizing his running back adjacent skills is one way to accomplish that, not only because he's such an effective runner, but the threat of him bolting the pocket for chunks of real estate is a good idea on merit and restricts how much attention a defense can devote to players like Barkley and Brown. To say nothing of the larger downfield passing windows it opens for the sometimes scattershot distributor. Yet, Hurts' 105 carries this season were essentially 2/3 of his typical run game utilization from the previous 3 seasons. His 8 touchdown runs were his fewest since his 2020 rookie year when he started 4 games. At the end of the day, we didn't create enough explosives, Sirianni said, as an assessment of the loss to San Francisco, though also a microism of the season. They made more plays than we did. They coached better than we did, and that's why they won. Hurts, the Super Bowl 59 MVP, is never going to be the next Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes from a holistic standpoint. Also, he doesn't need to be if the Eagles can revert to patterning an approach that allows him to do what he does best and not tie one arm or leg, as the case may be, behind his back. Number 3, let A.J. Brown go. A team captain, he obviously respected locker room figure. Sirianni likes him too, though couldn't resist barking at him on the sideline Sunday. And when things are going well, Brown is one of the most dominant receivers in the league, certainly not an easily replaceable or dispensable asset. Brown was also a perpetual distraction this season, to the point that Lurie had to tell him to shut up in November after Brown's fusillade of complaints, essentially constant dissatisfaction with his production. Notably, the Eagles were 2-3 when Brown had 100 or more receiving yards this season, and 6-2 when he had fewer than 50. He also had a crucial drop against the 49ers, finishing with 3 catches for 25 yards. And on a night when Philly most definitely needed more from him. Brown has $29 million coming to him in 2026. The final guarantees on a contract that will run through the 2029 season. That means, from a salary cap perspective, it would be tough to trade him, particularly before June 1st, as the deal would essentially wipe out General Manager Howie Roseman's current $20 million surplus per over the cap for his free agent budget. Yet running it back with Brown doesn't seem sustainable anymore. Send him to New England for a reunion with his first NFL coach, Mike Vrabel, and recoup what should be a sizable return for a guy who unquestionably elite from a football perspective. Number 4, replenish the offensive line. No one has to twist Roseman's arms to pick young blockers in the draft, yet he also hasn't taken one in the first 2 rounds since 2022, when C. Cam Jurgens arrived late in round 2. R.T. Lane Johnson, who deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer upon retirement, is going to be 36 this spring. His absence this season was notable, a bum foot injury preventing him from playing Sunday, as injuries limited him to 10 starts, his fewest since 2020. The unit at large also missed Mekhi Becton, who was a revelation at right guard in 2024, his lone season in Philly, before the Los Angeles Chargers scooped him up with a big offer in free agency. If nothing else, more quality, young depth seems like a prerequisite here. Number 5, plan for life without the tush-push. This is a corollary to step 4, but not only were the Eagles less effective at running their once automatic signature play, left tackle Jordan Mailata told me a few weeks ago the team doesn't even expect it will remain legal in 2026 after NFL owners granted it a stay of execution last spring. Maybe that's ultimately for the best. It's a physically demanding tactic and one that seemed to suffer without Becton and Johnson collapsing the left side of a defensive front. Given Hurts' strength as a runner, to say nothing of Barkley's presence or the creative deployment of highly effective tight end Dallas Goedert this season, the Eagles should be fine in short yardage situations regardless. Still, Sirianni and company may have to adjust their philosophical thinking, giving the push play so often gave Philly the luxury of choosing among a wide array of options in third and short ahead of a near inevitable conversion on 4th down. Number 6, address typical off-season considerations. As noted, Roseman currently has $20 million to play with and must assess whether or not to re-sign Goddard, linebacker Nakobe Dean, and or S. Reed Blankenship. Offensive linebacker Jalen Phillips, a mid-season trade deadline acquisition, will likely be too expensive to retain, even for the master capologist like Roseman. And while Phillips did come at the price of a 3rd-round pick, Roseman had one to burn after obtaining a round 3 choice in 2024 for offensive lineman Hassan Reddick in what turned out to be a fleecing of the New York Jets. Defensive line depth is becoming an intermediate concern, with Jordan Davis and Moro Ojomo heading into a contract year. It's certainly a lot to address, but the Eagles know they need to take their medicine, and few organizations are as adroit as adapting on the fly or laying the groundwork to do so as expertly as Roseman does. At the end of the day, there were a lot of elements when you end up with a loss, and we haven't had this feeling of ending our season since the 2023 with a loss, said Sirianni. That's why it hurts, because it's been a while. But yeah, at the end of the day, we need to find ways to be more explosive. Time to light that fuse. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 9 minutes after the hour. For Rogers, it's time for reflection after a reality check. Thanks for the memories, Aaron Rodgers. If that's what it if that was it, the last hurrah in a 21-year career that will ultimately be stamped with a Hall of Fame induction, you surely deserved a better send-off than the pounding inflicted by the Houston Texans on Monday night, January 12th. Then again, it was fitting enough. No, the season of hope for Rodgers with the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he joined forces with the likes of Mike Tomlin, Cam Hayward, and T.J. Watt, didn't quite turn out to produce a made-for-Hollywood ending. But at least he gave it a shot. Sure, the standard is the standard. For a man with 4 NFL MVP awards and a Super Bowl title on his resume, even if it was 15 years ago, making a cameo appearance in the NFL playoffs was undoubtedly half empty. It was fair enough if there was going to be some magical turn-back-the-clock run in these unpredictable NFL playoffs. The 42-year-old legend had to start by beating a team that includes a gang of maulers who formulate arguably the league's best defense. Turns out that was way too much to ask. Instead, Rodgers was issued a cruel reality check from the Texans, who turned 2 Rodgers turnovers into second-half touchdowns to add insult to the 30-6 shellacking in the AFC wildcard playoff game. Maybe this was the takeaway message from the Texans. Go ahead, just retire already. Too bad, maybe the last throw Rodgers will ever make as an active NFL quarterback was intercepted by Kalen Bullock and returned 50 yards for a pick six with just under 3 minutes to play. Mercy rule stuff, indeed. Earlier in the fourth quarter, Rodgers, who operated for much of the night with all the space afforded in a phone booth, fumbled as he was pummeled in a collapsing pocket. Sheldon Rankin snatched up the football and rubbled 31 yards with a big man touchdown return. And other images of frustration, the sacks, misfires, miscommunication with receivers, DK Metcalf's drop, and the net effect was something that probably led many viewers of primetime broadcasts to cover their eyes, or maybe turn off the TV. After a full slate of nail-biters over the weekend to open the NFL playoffs, it seemed especially cruel that Rodgers went down in the pure beatdown of a blowout. The Steelers were outscored 23-0 in the fourth quarter, rather than with some last-minute drama. It was not the ideal way for Rodgers to be remembered. He couldn't even lead the Steelers to a touchdown, the first time that happened for Rodgers in the playoffs, and converting on third downs was almost as challenging. On a night the franchise lost a 7th consecutive postseason game, he was not the savior to reverse that pattern. Rodgers couldn't run, couldn't hide, and certainly could not compete like he used to as dominant D lineman Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter, Denico Autry, and Rankins kept messing up the plan. Rodgers was sacked 4 times and finished with a 50.8 passer rating, and it was worse than those numbers suggest. Hey, not every legend rides off like John Elway in a hail of Super Bowl confetti. Most, like Rodgers, have to go out the hard way, reminded of how far removed they are from their prime. Of course, Rodgers hasn't definitely declared that this is and he would retire. Understandably, in the immediate aftermath of Monday night's game, he would not as much acknowledge that his brutal evening and the collapse was hardly all the quarterback would affect the decision about his future. No, I'm not going to make any emotional decisions, Rodgers said. Disappointed? Obviously. It was such a fun year. A lot of adversity, but a lot of fun. It's been a great year, obviously in my life, and this is really a good part of that. Coming here and being a part of this team, so it's disappointing to be sitting here with the season over. Stay tuned. If you followed Rodgers' saga, you realize that it could be a while, weeks, perhaps months, before he makes a decision on whether to return. While he sent signals early on after joining the Steelers in June that he was likely in his final season, he has more recently softened that stance and left the door open to play the back half of his 2-year contract in 2026. There were notable victories for sure. Rodgers led the Steelers to the AFC North crown, even if it was enabled by a missed field goal on the last snap of the NFL's final regular season game. He made it back to the postseason for the first time in 4 years, and in a violent occupation where participants are often carted off or hobble off on crutches. Rodgers, 2 seasons removed from a torn Achilles, walked off the field at Acrisure Stadium on his own power. In any event, he can tell all of that with him to a darkness retreat, as his retirement decision again begs for deep contemplation. Last year, Rodgers didn't officially commit to joining the Steelers until June, after weeks of courting by Tomlin. Now, a decision includes the perspective of meshing within the Steelers' culture that is such a contrast to what he experienced his 2 seasons with the New York Jets. Even so, there's the matter of whether he has the desire to try it again. Surely, Rodgers doesn't want to go out like Monday night, yet he should also realize that if he decides to come back, next time might even be worse. Louisville women rising again in ACC. Since joining the Atlantic Coast Conference in 2014, the Louisville women's basketball team has been the league's most consistent program. From 2018 through 2023, the Cardinals went to 5 consecutive Elite Eights, won 4 straight ACC regular season titles, and appeared in the Final Four twice. Under Coach Jeff Walz, the expectation for the Cardinals is competing for the ACC crown and a Final Four bid every season. When Louisville didn't do that in the past 2 years, losing during the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament in 2024 and 25, folks started to wonder if Louisville's reign was over. There's been a good basketball played at Louisville for about 19 years now, Walt said a few weeks ago after an overtime win at North Carolina, pointing to the start of his tenure as coach in 2007. You know, our standards are a little higher than most. When we get beat in the second round, it's a bad year. When we lost in the first round, I had a for sale sign in my yard. I mean, people were like, "Get rid of this guy." There's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek hyperbole from Walz, but it's true. Fans started counting them out in the race for the ACC title, much less contending for the national championship. Those who had pessimistic beliefs about Louisville were validated in November when the Cardinals lost to UConn and rival Kentucky by double digits. But then December came. Louisville nearly beat South Carolina, losing to the mighty Gamecocks by 2 points, and then won a ranked road game at North Carolina, followed by outclassing Tennessee on a neutral court. Since losing to the Gamecocks, Louisville has won 9 straight games. Waltz's Cardinals not only look like the best in the ACC, but also the conference's best hope at a top 16 seed in the NCAA tournament and Final Four bid. Statistically, the Cardinals are playing great defense and taking care of the ball. They rank 12th nationally in opponent three-point shooting, 21st in opponent offensive rebound rate, 13th in total rebounds per game, and 18th in an assistant turnover ratio. When we pass the ball and we're unselfish, we've got 6 or 7 kids that can make open shots that you have to guard. And when we do that, then we can spread the floor, Waltz said last week. We can put pressure on you, and that's why I think we're having success now. The team is also growing and maturing as the season goes along. It's a young squad with a combined 10 freshmen and sophomores. Imari Berry and Alif Istanbuloglu have made the biggest improvements. Tajana Roberts is still playing at an all-ACC level after earning a nod there as a freshman, and Laura Ziegler has lived up to the hype since transferring in from St. Joseph's. Louisville is 4-3 in Quad 1 games, has a net of 11, and is 7th in WAB, wins above bubble. The losses to UConn and Kentucky feel like a lifetime ago. We competed and played well in non-conference. We had a really nice win over Tennessee. I think part of it is our league, our teams played, Walt said. Like Duke, you know we're playing good teams. We're playing ranked opponents. Ahead are two big tests. The Cardinals play at Notre Dame on Thursday, January 15th, and at NC State on Sunday. Both places that aren't kind to road teams. If Louisville comes out on top on both, they should be taken seriously as a contender again. Top prospect shelved for Duke. Since the preseason, Duke head coach Kara Lawson has been complimentary of freshman Emily Skinner, ranked as the fourth best prospect in the 2025 class by ESPN. The 6-foot point guard came into this season with a lot of hype. She's the best passer we've had here since I've been at Duke, and that's not really close, Lawson said after Duke's November 12th win over Norfolk State. She sees the floor in an advanced way. She's able to deliver catchable passes that are easy for people to shoot or easy for people to lay up. And she has a great intelligence about her. She understands the playbook, understands the strengths of her teammates, and that again, more advanced than the typical freshman. But Skinner hasn't played all that much, with a total of 47 minutes across 3 games for the Blue Devils, seemingly due to a nagging lower body injury on which Lawson has been mostly mum. Skinner hasn't taken the floor for Duke since December 7th, when the Blue Devils beat Virginia Tech. A source close to Skinner, familiar with her situation, told USA Today Sports that she'll be redshirting this season. Since Skinner played in 3 games, she should retain this year of eligibility. Meanwhile, Duke has adjusted as the Blue Devils have now won 8 consecutive games. Coaching carousel warming up. Joe McCowan announced last March this season would be his last as coach at Northwestern. The 69-year-old has been head coach in Division I women's basketball for 40 years, with previous stops at New Mexico State and George Washington. He's 783 to 442, and 19 of his teams have been to the NCAA tournament. But since taking the reins at Northwestern in 2008, the Wildcats have gone dancing just twice and seem to be on track to miss March Madness again, with a 6-10 overall record this season. Knowing McCowan's retirement is looming, Northwestern is already vetting candidates, multiple sources told USA Today Sports. Second-round interviews with candidates will begin this week. Some of the best mid-major coaches in the country, from the Ivy League, Atlantic 10, and CAA, will be in the mix for this opening. Michigan native Carrie Moore, who won the Ivy with Harvard last season, is among the front runners. Elsewhere, schools that have yet to announce coaching changes are quietly putting feelers out to agents and potential candidates about who might be interested in their job if it were to open. 2 of those that bubbled up last week, multiple sources told USA Today Sports, were Texas A&M and VCU. At Texas A&M, Joni Taylor is 14-39 in SEC play in 4 seasons with 1 NCAA tournament appearance. Beth O'Boyle has been the head coach at VCU since 2014, but has gone dancing just once, in the COVID-impacted 2021 season, and is on pace for her 3rd losing season in 4 years. UCLA's dual sports star has to scale back time on the court. One of the feel-good moments of this women's basketball season was when Megan Grant notched an and one for UCLA in a win over Long Beach State. It didn't impact the game as the Bruins led by 60, but the bench erupted when they saw the softball star connect on the basket. This is Grant's first season playing college basketball. Softball fans are familiar with Grant, an All-American utility player who has featured in the outfield and infield corners for the Bruins across 3 seasons, mashing 49 home runs in 180 games. But with softball season approaching, basketball coach Corey Close has to share Grant with softball skipper Kelly Inuai Perez. And so, Close said, Grant won't travel with the basketball team for the rest of the regular season, but will play in home games when it doesn't conflict with softball. She's pretty much all of softballs until we get to the preseason, Close said after UCLA's win at Nebraska on Sunday. And then we're going to sort of reevaluate at that point. But she's been a great addition to our team, and even though she's not here in the day-to-day right now, she's here in the spirit. Grant has played in 12 basketball games this season and scored in 3 of them, including a win over North Carolina. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 29 minutes after the hour. This is the Life section. Jones brings her open heart to new Today role. When Hoda Kotb revealed to Jenna Bush Hager in the late 2024 that she'd be leaving Today and their eponymously famous 4th hour of NBC's morning program, the former first daughter couldn't believe it. I felt terrible because the first word was no, Bush Hager tells USA Today. I was like, no, because it was shocking. It really was. We were having so much fun. In the evening, she called her parents, the nation's 43rd president, George W. Bush, and former First Lady Laura Bush, unable to stifle a stream of tears. At first, my dad was like, is she sick? Says Bush Hager, 44. I'm like, no, she's leaving the show. And he's like, baby, you've got this. It's fine. Kotb left in January of 2025 to spend more time with her growing daughters, Haley and Hope, and to launch a wellness company, Joy 101. In an extensive search for her replacement, the chair beside Bush Hager became a revolving door, welcoming 60 guest hosts, including Scarlett Johansson, Olivia Munn, and Dwayne Wade. Once Kotb exited, we were definitely nervous and wondering what this process would be like, Bush Hager says. I was working as a team. I mean, I'm a twin. So to me, playing off somebody, knowing that I can lift somebody up, and vice versa, is important to me. Nerves subsided quickly when Today with Jenna and Friends launched, and Bush Hager enjoyed the experience. One co-host stood out as the perfect fit. Chanel Jones, a veteran of Weekend Today and the 3rd hour of Today. Chanel's a pro, Bush Hager says. She's been a journalist for 30-plus years, and that's important. We're doing a television show, but also she has the most open heart. She's not afraid to talk about things that all of us are feeling, and that's somebody that I want to be partnered with. I want somebody who's going to come to work as they are and share who they are with me. with you, with our audience. And that is what I'm most looking forward to. It's the purity of her heart, and that she's not scared to share it with everybody, the beautiful and the heartbreaking. The show undoubtedly will evolve with the addition of a new co-host in ways that are being kept close to the vest and will unfurl organically. We can have a rundown, says Jones 47. We can have a plan, but we know well enough that when we sit down, it just rolls. It just happens. And that is different for Chanel, Bushhager said. So to get to kind of play is going to be fun. It's a new muscle to flex, Jones agrees, and she embraces the opportunity to grow. I'm looking forward to getting to know myself in ways that perhaps I haven't explored. Jones says, I can't help but to be changed by the last 18 months of my life. Jones lost her husband and the father of her 3 children, Yushi OJ, in May of 2025, after he was diagnosed with glioblastoma, an aggressive brain tumor. The painful experience comes with metaphorical insignia, she says. You meet someone in the military and they come in and they have their stripes, Jones says. I feel like I have my stripes for life. The things that I've been through, I've earned my stripes. But I use those and I'm proud of them. And I sit down and I say, okay, how has this changed me? How can I use that to help people, to make them laugh, to let them know that we are going to be okay? We're all going to be okay. And we can still have new opportunities and new adventures and new friendships. And it will only, I hope, help to make a much richer life and enrich my life. This thing lets Arnett at last get dramatic. Will Arnett is known for making you laugh. If he makes you cry, well, just know that's a long time coming. The comedic part of the Emmy-nominated actor's resume is no joke. Starring in such TV series as Arrested Development and 30 Rock, and films including Hot Rod and Blades of Glory, plus voicing Lego Batman in Lego movies. He has his most dramatic role to date, ironically, as a rookie stand-up comedian in director Bradley Cooper's Is This Thing On? Sometimes in life you play the hand you're dealt with a little bit, Arnett tells USA Today. Growing up in Toronto, I never thought I was going to become a comedic actor, per se. I probably should have had more of a plan, if I'm being honest. The Toronto board performer moved to New York City when he was 20 to do serious stuff, and after years of auditions and failed pilots, Arnett got something really cool in the early 2000s with Arrested Development. And then I found myself in this place where more of those opportunities happened. But he says, I always wanted to do stuff like, Is This Thing On? Arnett stars as Alex Novak, a middle-aged dad trying to navigate the end of his marriage to Tess, Laura Dern, and figure out how to live separately from their 2 sons. It's a lot for the guy, and wanting to get a drink at a bar, but not having the cover charge handy. He's inexplicably signs up for an open mic night at the comedy club next door. Having no real material ready, Alex launches into a spontaneous public therapy session, getting personal about his separation and family life. It unlocks a new gig as well as a creative side where Alex gains new perspective, though he has some explaining to do when Tess accidentally catches his set one night. The movie was inspired by John Bishop, an English pharmaceutical rep turned comedian whom Arnett met, and I related to the transformation he goes through at this point of his life, says Arnett, who co-wrote the script with his buddy Cooper and British screen scribe Mark Chappell. I wish I was smart enough to have done it on purpose, but it just kind of happened. Doing stand-up was a new challenge. But for Arnett, the very intimate and genuine moments alongside Dern were actually probably scarier than the comedy club bits. The key scene is when Alex and Tess have an important conversation after she sees him get brutally honest about their life in front of a crowd of strangers. She says to him she's mad. She doesn't know why, but part of it is she sees a version of Alex that she remembers, Arnett says. That's the guy she fell in love with on stage. Freewheeling, feeling good, laughing, and I'm sure that it feels like, what the heck, that's who we were supposed to be. In his own life, Arnett has had to deal with children and breakups. He was married to actress Penelope Ann Miller and Amy Poehler and has 3 sons. He shares Archie, 17, and Abel, 15, with fellow comedy star Poehler, and Denny, 5, with former partner Alessandra Braun. But the actor is quick to point out that Is This Thing On is not the Will Arnett story. Playing Alex, he found that some things are baked into your DNA, Arnett says. A scene when Alex is folding his kids' clothes at his old home and he realizes it's bedtime and he has to leave for his apartment in a moment that John has told us about. That abject sort of loneliness you feel on those nights when you're there and you get reminded of your kids. I've heard people say, "Oh, I get sad in a scene and I think about my dog dying," as an actor to try to connect to this particular emotion. I have had, of course, moments that are akin to Alex's, in the sense of divorce and kids and all that stuff. But it's very important to keep those things separate and access that emotion in a way that's specific to him. More significant for Arnett's performance, he says, in his 55 years on the planet, "You know what? I couldn't have done it 6 months earlier," he says. "I've thought about that a lot. It was the right time. Because of what was going on in my life, all these things needed to conspire for me for it to happen. Having such a meaty role in This Is This Thing On felt like a dream that had passed me by. No matter what happens, just actually going through the process of doing it, to me, felt very satisfying artistically, if I may use that word," Arnett says, laughing. Is he at a creative high point? I'm not sure. I'm a really fortunate guy. I've got 3 great kids who are really happy, and I get to do this kind of stuff. In that way, I'm in a life high point, I'll say that. As for doing more dramatic roles, now he's more inclined to do roles like Alex that I can connect to on an emotional level, Arnett says. He's a character who doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles. He doesn't have a limp. Half his face isn't smushed in. There's no tricks to it. He's you and me, and in a real stripped-down way. Assessing that was really the job. I like the idea of characters going forward that don't come from outer space, but live here among us. Rivers polices red carpet looks. Melissa Rivers has strong feelings about Teyana Taylor's diamond thong at the Golden Globes. Taylor, who won Best Supporting Actress, wore a custom Schiaparelli floor-length gown that featured a diamond-encrusted bow design that sat over a bedazzled thong. Vogue is calling it an ushering in of the year of the crack. But former Fashion Police host Rivers is not welcoming the trend. "I loved it until she showed the bow," Rivers tells USA Today in a Golden Globes post-mortem, calling the front of the gown a work of art. "I don't care to see anybody's crack. Do you know what I mean? What is this, plumber chic?" The best and worst Golden Globes red carpet looks. The party in the back, as Taylor called it in her acceptance speech, was among Rivers' picks for the worst trends of this year's red carpet. Jenna Ortega also sported a cut-out low waist in her gothic Dilara Glue dress. I'm not sure what the prettiest part of anyone's body. Are we back to the low-slung jeans? Next thing you know, our thong is going to be showing again, Rivers said. I want them to look like stars. I want this to be fantasy. In men's fashion, River was delighted to see a return to the classic suit. The fashion police host stands by tradition when it comes to menswear. She praised Leonardo DiCaprio and George Clooney, as well as newcomer Patrick Schwarzenegger. But the standout becoming a certainty like death and taxes was Coleman Domingo, dressed to the nines. He is truly a man in the fashion that can pull off anything. He's becoming our Kate Blanchett, Rivers says. He knows how to do fashion right for men. He knows where to push. He knows where to pull. The one trend Rivers doesn't want to see this award season. Rivers also is not a fan of the naked dress sported this year by Jennifer Lawrence in Givenchy. Please, just make the naked dress stop. I'm bored. And don't be bringing back cutouts. Let's put that one away for a while. Stella McCarthy did it best back in the late 90s and early 2000s. We're not going to do it better. Move on. But while she's not a fan of the risque formal wear, Rivers concedes that Lawrence completely surprised her. Did I love the dress? Not particularly. But I mean, about stepping out of the box, I'm like, oh, Mama's looking good, Rivers said. She did give me that holy blank moment because it's not what you expected, and I love that. Fashion is supposed to be fun. Brutally honest red carpet opinions. It was a red carpet mostly devoid of risks and wow moments, Rivers says. But there were a few standouts, such as Selena Gomez, Dakota Fanning, and Amanda Seyfried. Others, including Walton Goggins, made Rivers cringe. Here are her brutally honest Golden Globes red carpet opinions. Amanda Seyfried. Seyfried in Versace's nailed it, Rivers says. Modern Grace Kelly just floated in. Ariana Grande. Total caught me by surprise with the black, Rivers says. It was like, I am no more than the good witch. Walton Goggins. Rivers was not a fan of Goggins' gold shirt. He breaks my heart after time again. I'm feeling personally attacked. He needs to stop, Rivers says. I like you so much in every interaction we've had. I like you so much. Why are you doing this? Are you trying to hurt me? Selena Gomez. It's what I call painfully chic, Rivers says. I always look forward to Selena Gomez, who never, in the last 2 years, has disappointed. It was the whole look. It was the hair, the makeup, the Chanel. Such a star. Miley Cyrus. I liked Miley best when she went through her very chic glam stage, Rivers says. I still think she's doing it. The organza bow ruffled thing, I feel like that was right off the runway. And I feel like Miley's this is what I'm wearing. Jenna Ortega. I did not like it, but what I did like is there were some other gothy kind of girls, so it felt like it was Jenna and her minions, Rivers says. Tessa Thompson. Rivers called this color move unexpected. Loved, Rivers says. Chase Infinity. Loved that for her first time out. She did not go so conservative, Rivers says. She's going to be one to watch. Dakota Fanning. I love that we had the battle of the Fanning sisters, Rivers says. And usually Ellie kills it, and it's always on everybody's best dress list. I think Dakota took this one. Rose Byrne. I'm a huge Rose Byrne fan. I felt like the dress didn't fit. Harrison Williams and Connor Story. Cute, fun, and that's what it should be, Rivers says of the noon cover. Heated rivalry stars William and Story. Stars honor those who bring out stars quality. At the second annual WWD Style Awards, brevity was in vogue. So much so that a cheeky George Clooney let loose a certain four-letter word while jesting about a fellow actor. The 64-year-old actor, arriving straight from an appearance at the AFI Awards, kicking off the event January 9th by accepting the Red Carpet Visionary Award on behalf of the late Giorgio Armani, whose creations Clooney often has sported, most significantly on his wedding day. The Italian fashion house founder died in September. It's an odd thing to say. He was 91 years old, and he left us far too soon. He just celebrated 50 years in the industry, Clooney said. I would argue that if anyone should be up here talking about Giorgio, it should probably be Richard Gere. I think the two put each other on the map. But since he couldn't show up, and you know, blank him, Clooney joked to the thunderous laughter in the ballroom. The A-lister then wisely backtracked, perhaps in an effort to mitigate a potential viral video moment. And that's the only thing that will come out of this whole evening. I actually love him. Demi Moore, stick with me on this one. Moore, who was honored as a fashion icon, was seated at one of the tables in front of Clooney. I'm only accepting this only on behalf of Armani's family, his co-workers, and his friends, Clooney said. And all I can say is, I wish he was here to see this, but maybe he's watching. Cameron Diaz, Mindy Kaling gush about the stylist, makeup artist. The evening's guests appeared to appreciate the conciseness of a 90-minute ceremony that fell on the first day of a marathon weekend for Hollywood that led up to the Golden Globe Awards on January 11th. The longest speeches from the 11 award recipients, which included Moore, Pamela Anderson, and Hailey Bieber, impressively ran only a few minutes, and the shortest speech of the night came from none other than Kourtney Kardashian Barker, fewer than 20 seconds. The reality TV star, founder of vitamin and supplement line Lemme, boasted the title of Wellness Entrepreneur of the Year. The recipients, successionists, however, could have been because of lack of preparedness. I was told there was no speeches tonight, so I'll keep it very short and simple, Bieber said while accepting the Style Trailblazer Award. The WWD Style Awards primarily celebrated those behind the curtain in Hollywood, who create magic for A-list stars, stylist Aaron Walsh and Jason Bolden, makeup artist Gucci Westman, hairstylist Adair Abergel, and facialist Lord Gavin MacLeod Valentine. Standing by these artists are their cheerleaders, were Cameron Diaz, Emily Blunt, Mindy Kaling, Kristen Stewart, and Tyreek Withers. Fashion icon Demi Moore waxed poetic about fashion as a place to express myself, to tell stories in a different way. But she also poked fun on our less glamorous moments that aren't typically captured on camera. As stylist Brad Gorski can tell you, if left to my own devices, I dress like a 12-year-old boy, the Substance actress said. She then gave a shout-out to someone else who was almost always at her side, her tiny chihuahua. I'm sorry I didn't bring Pilaf tonight. I was informed that I was missing my chance to get a picture with her and George, Moore told the crowd. We're working on a book that is Pilaf and her leading men. Switching to a more earnest tone, she opened up about her hope for self-acceptance in the new year. My 2026 wish is to continue with the acceptance of ourselves as we are. We don't need to be different, Moore said. The most beautiful part of who we are is just being our unique selves, our imperfect selves. Hairstylist Adair Abergel jokes he almost left Kristen Stewart bald. Kristen Stewart, seated in between her hairstylist Abergel and her wife Dylan Meyer, was shown in a pre-recorded video, professing her love for someone who is like a brother and sister and best friend. Abergel repaid the compliment by calling Stewart, who recently released her directorial debut, The Chronology of Walter, a fearless artist who is unafraid of being nearly bald. Thank you so much for knowing me so deeply as a human. Whether we're shaving your head one day, bleaching your roots before a premiere, or notching your hair into your hair and with kitchen scissors, to the point where people yell at me asking me, "Listen, why are you leaving her bald? What is the problem here?" He said, "This is the kind of collaborator you are in my life. You are an absolutely fearless artist and an icon." This career, which started with Abergel behind a salon chair at age 16, has given me a dream life. In a world that often prescribes norms and convention, I'm inspired daily by those who dare to be different, who embrace their uniqueness and allow their personal style to narrate their stories. As DiCaprio moves, so the room moves with him. When else will you be in the same room with Leonardo DiCaprio? That was one attendee who introduced herself to DiCaprio inside the BAFTA Tea Party, asked as the one battle after another star tried to make his way through the crowd. The party, which was canceled last year because of the deadly Palisades wildfires, is hosted by the British Academy of Film and Television Arts. It's a major stop on the awards season circuit, as guests mingle over tea, cocktails, and bites such as smoked salmon and Welsh rabbit bechamel, cheese sauces melted on a baguette. DiCaprio was in line for another busy awards season. One battle took home 4 prizes at Sunday's Golden Globes and is up for 7 Screen Actors Guild Actor Awards, which air in March. The Paul Thomas Anderson action dramedy already picked by Best Picture at the Critics' Choice Awards. As for the actor's appearance, it came with family and fanfare. While inside the Beverly Hills Four Seasons, DiCaprio posed for photos with one battle co-star, Tanya Taylor, and stopped for selfies with fans. Flanked by his parents, George and Peggy, DiCaprio was inside the ballroom with onlookers for about 15 minutes. Security escorted him and his family through a side exit. Save the commotion over Leo. The BAFTA Tea Party is typically a pretty low-key event, a bite star-studded. Kate Hudson greets Amy Lou Wood, talks family game nights. It's also looking to be busy award season for Kate Hudson, who has Golden Globe and Actor Award nominations for her performance in Song Sung Blue, a movie about the Neil Diamond tribute act Lightning and Thunder. Inside the tea party, Hudson came over to White Lotus actress Amy Lou Wood, eliciting an "oh my God" from Wood as the two embraced. On the event's red carpet, Hudson joked with USA Today about her brother Oliver's claim that Kate is the most competitive in their family. Hudson revealed that the family holds an Olympic-style tournament every year, rotating among games including ping pong, cornhole, and relay races. That's when you see who's the most competitive, she says, and the truth is, it's Wyatt Russell. After naming her brother, however, Hudson offers a caveat. When it comes to party games, she shows no mercy. Perhaps Oliver was right after all. Kevin O'Leary wears 2 watches, tells a crazy Chalamet story. He's one of the most unlikely personalities making the rounds this award season, and he's doing so with one expensive watch on each wrist. Entrepreneur.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,